within decision-making processes. So with all the seats in Parliament, this is some examples of what we have done to ensure the protection of human rights and subscribing to value systems. One, the courts. In Barbados, if someone considers that their human rights have been violated by the government, he can seek redress before the courts. Legal aid is provided to persons bringing constitutional motions in the High Court if they are unable to afford the cost of retaining an attorney at law. Two, the Constitution. Barbados' Constitution contains a Bill of Rights which follows the Universal Declaration of Human Rights model, in which a number of basic freedoms are guaranteed: the right to life, the right to personal liberty, protection from slavery and forced labor, protection from inhumane treatment, protection from discrimination on grounds of race, place of origin, political opinions, color, or creed, the right to a fair trial, and the presumption of innocence. 3. In 1993, we established the Social Partnership. This is a tripartite agreement reflected in the instruments of policies or protocols and associated institutions that represent a joint and collective commitment to the formulation of policies, the solving of problems, and the management of a process of change and social development. These consist of the government, employers' representatives, workers' organizations, and civil society. 4. We have put in place transformational governance. This is an enhanced system of committees of Parliament aimed at effecting wider national discussion and greater consultation with citizens on proposed legislation and bills. This involves the implementation of 3 standing committees relating to governance, economic issues, social and environmental issues. This further gives the public further involvement in the process of legislation. In this regard, following the second reading of bills that touch and concern the public in specific areas, for example, the medicinal cannabis bill, what we did, we sent it to further consideration for public consultation. We put in place a select committee. We send it out, it goes to the public for wider consultation. Then when it comes back with examples and amendments, then we do the third reading and the bill is passed. 5, the government has implemented whistleblower legislation and anti-corrupt legislation. The objective is to fight and punish corruption and hold ministers and chairpersons of boards accountable for their actions. These bills, for the first time, afford immunity and protection for persons who come forward and give evidence relative to corrupt practices that were done by elected officials without fear of recrimination. 7, the government has created people's assemblies for people to be more directly involved in the running of their communities. These are geared to increase the participation of citizens in civic affairs and insist in the roles of oversight and statutory entities. They will enhance communication between communities, members of parliament, and government, and also act as effective enablers for resource mobilization on behalf of communities and citizens who are in general need. I've been given 1 more minute. In summary, the success of small island development states in overcoming the obstacles and ensuring that the principles of democracy remain intact and that human rights violations do not surface can be summarized in 2 words: good governance. This consists of the following: 1, permit citizens to have a voice in the decision-making process. 2, provides everyone with timely, accurate information. 3, holds decision makers accountable for the choices they make. 4, is transparent and responsive. 5, follows the rule of law and respects the independence of the judiciary. 6, is effective and efficient. 7, is equitable and inclusive. And 8, it is the anchor for social, environmental, and economic justice. I thank you for your indulgence.
Muchas gracias. Vamos a continuar ahora. Tiene uso de la palabra la honorable Rosaina Adam, parlamentaria de Maldivas, miembro fundadora y presidenta del equipo parlamentario de respuesta rápida de PGA, miembro de la Junta Directiva de PGA. Honorable Excelencia, está en uso de la palabra.
Good afternoon, everyone. We all know that democratic backsliding is the beginning of human rights violations leading into atrocities. The question is, what can we do as parliamentarians to prevent and fight democratic backsliding? Today, I would like to share the experience of Maldives from 2013 to 2018 during President Yamin's administration when democracy was under attack, and the role of the opposition MPs in restoring democracy. We saw how things start small and then escalated. Dictators, if given an inch, will take a mile. President Yamin was such a corrupt man. He used his parliament majority to change the Supreme Court and independent institutions and place his puppets in office. To amend laws, to give away islands without bidding, to amend the constitution, and to sell our land. In our case, it was the freedom of assembly that was narrowed down first. He changed the law using his majority in the parliament such that we could only assemble in one place in the capital, and we had to get permission from the police first. We weren't allowed to use any vehicles in protests. This was mainly to stop us from carrying our sound systems in lorries. This later escalated to the point where we were forbidden to have protest walks on the roads, and we got harassed by the police even when we were on the pavement. So here's what we did. We brought out an official statement by the opposition, and we declared that we believed these amendments to the law were unconstitutional and that we would not follow them. Each MP, being an elected official, has a power base in their constituencies. We have the ear of the people. So it was the MPs who brought the people together on the roads. We arranged protests and mass rallies. We went on the streets every night with our supporters. We made sure each MP brought at least 20 people with them from their constituencies so that every night there were at least about 400 people on the road with us. They said we couldn't use vehicles in our protests, so we put our sound system in a cart and dragged it with us, as you can see on the screen. We didn't make it easy for President Yamin. Every single night he had to bring the police out on the roads, and you can imagine what a toll that would take on the police to run after us every night for 4 years. Next, he started arresting opposition leaders in the hope of stopping the protests. One by one, all the opposition party leaders were arrested. Then he arrested opposition MPs and activists as well. As more MPs were arrested as well as activists, we made arrangements among us to ensure that their families were well looked after. We raised funds and did food shopping for those families that needed it. We got lawyers on our side to fight for them in the courts free of charge. These were actions that helped everyone to stay on course, because then they knew that even if they got arrested, they would be taken care of. It was the presence of the opposition MPs every night on the roads, despite the arrest of our colleagues, that gave the people the courage to continue. And it was the opposition parliament leader, the current president, who led the party while our party leader was in jail. Even he was arrested for a period. Next, we brought our protest into the parliament. We called for the release of opposition leaders on the parliament floor. We protested while he continued to pass bills to limit our basic human rights. He stopped broadcasting parliament sessions because of this, but we became journalists inside the parliament, and I broadcasted the sessions live on Facebook and Twitter. The media picked my live feed and brought it on TV. The result of all this was that he brought in the military and literally threw us out of the parliament. But that did not stop us. We continued using the media to impart knowledge and educate the public. We went on TV channels every night and talked about what was going on in the parliament and educated the public on the impact of the bills he was passing. Even though we weren't allowed in the parliament, we conducted the budget speeches in our party office hall. This helped us keep the public informed, and in turn, they were motivated to continue to join in our protest and fight for their rights. The TV channels and online newspapers that continued to support the opposition was also continuously under attack. One reporter went missing and another blogger was murdered. One TV station was deliberately burnt down, and even though there was video footage of the people who did it, they were not arrested. Then a defamation act was passed in Parliament, curtailing our freedom of speech. Journalists were pepper sprayed and arrested for protesting against the Defamation Act. TV stations were continuously fined in millions under the Defamation Act. As MPs, we were able to support the media by informing our support base and helping to raise funds to pay the fines through our constituents who were able to help. This kept the media going. We as MPs helped to keep the world informed of what was happening in our country through our connections. MP Mahloof was the one who kept PGA informed about what was going on in the Maldives. We wrote to the IPU, the UN, the Commonwealth, Amnesty, the EU Parliament, and so on. Statements started pouring in from all the international organizations, and the pressure built. So much so that President Yamin withdrew the Maldives from the Commonwealth too. Because of the pressure from the public and the international community, some of the MPs from the ruling party joined the opposition. But when this happened, the president got the Supreme Court to rule that those MPs had lost their seats because they left the party they were elected from. There's no law in Maldives that prevents MPs from changing parties. With these unlawful rulings, the Supreme Court came under fire from the lawyers of Maldives, the public, and the international community. The public started protesting outside the judges' residences. It was MPs that led these protests as well. The Supreme Court finally budged, and in the election year, it ruled that the arrest and jailing of the political leaders and the removal of MPs from the parliament were unlawful, and that they had to be released. The night the Supreme Court judges brought out this verdict, the president declared a state of emergency and used the military to arrest 2 of the Supreme Court judges, including the Chief Justice, and they were jailed. This brought further pressure on the government from the public and the international community. But with the arrest of the Supreme Court judges and continuous pressure from the international community, even the Elections Commission that was on President Yamin's side decided that things had gone too far, and therefore they let us have a free and fair election, which he lost. We were able to restore democracy and overturn all the unconstitutional amendments he had brought to laws. The lesson here is that without the support of the parliament, President Yamin would not have been able to commit all the atrocities and human rights violations that he did, to jail all those people, to arrest and fine journalists, to be able to get away with the disappearance and murder of 2 journalists. Fortunately for us, he didn't get elected. If he had, we don't know what the situation in Maldives would be today. It was parliamentarians who played the main leadership role to bring this positive change. There are those countries who haven't been as fortunate as us, where genocide occurs and murders and disappearances happen every day. We parliamentarians can make a difference by using our position and our relationship with our constituents to educate people and prevent democratic backsliding. I have experienced this. Though some situations are of course more difficult than others, it's eventually the people of a nation that can change the course of that nation. Parliamentarians are the elected leaders that people turn to, who can bring a revolution if they all work together for the good of the people. And we as parliamentarians should never side with dictators and help them abuse the rights of our constituents. It's not overnight that genocide and other mass atrocities happen. Things happen gradually, and so we should try and prevent democratic backsliding as soon as we see the first signs of this happening. I hope our experience is something that we can all learn from. Thank you.